Let me tell you how a 20-cent piece of sidewalk chalk turned into two police cruisers, a local news van, and a neighborhood meeting that felt like a courtroom drama sponsored by beige paint samples. And no, I'm not exaggerating. I wish I was. Because this whole thing started with my kids doing what kids are supposed to do. Having fun. It was one of those perfect late spring Saturdays where the sky looks fake, like somebody photoshopped it. The grass was freshly cut. The air smelled like sunscreen and barbecue. And for once in my life, I felt like I was actually winning at this whole being a dad thing. I was sitting on the front steps with an iced tea, watching my two kids turn the edge of our driveway into their personal art studio. My son Owen is 9, the serious kind of kid. The type who kneels over his drawing like he's working on a NASA blueprint. He was sketching a dragon, carefully shading the scales in bright orange and green. My daughter Layla is 6, and basically a walking tornado. She was drawing a unicorn with 5 legs and a tail that looked like a rainbow explosion. She named it Captain Sprinkle. Owen claimed his dragon had heat-activated camouflage. Layla claimed her unicorn could run so fast it farts confetti. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my drink. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is the good part of life. These little moments you never plan for, but end up being the ones you miss later. I just leaned back, eyes half closed, soaking in their giggles and the scratchy sound of chalk on concrete, when a shadow fell over the steps. Not a normal shadow. A judgment shadow. I opened my eyes and there she was. Denise. Her real name was Denise, but nobody in the neighborhood called her that behind her back. She was the Grayish Queen. The woman who made neutral tones feel like a personality disorder. Denise lived 3 houses down in a home so perfectly maintained it looked like it had never been lived in. The kind of yard where even weeds seemed afraid to show up. She walked like she was always late to report someone. Tight posture, stiff smile, sunglasses that looked expensive enough to come with a warranty. In one hand, she held a plastic folder. In the other, her phone, already angled like a weapon. She didn't even acknowledge my kids. She stared at the chalk like it was gang graffiti. "Evan," she said, dragging my name out like she didn't enjoy the taste of it. "We need to talk." I stood up slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hey Denise, everything okay?" She pointed at the driveway art, like she was presenting evidence in court. "This," she said, tapping her folder, "is the community guidelines. I'm on the Architectural Standards Committee." I blinked. We had an Architectural Standards Committee? In a neighborhood full of the same 3 house models? "Okay," I said, still trying to be polite. And Denise flipped open the folder like she was about to read scripture. Exterior hardscape surfaces are to remain clean, uniform, and free of alterations that disrupt neighborhood appearance. She said it like she was announcing a verdict. I stared at her for a second, honestly thinking she was joking. "Denise," I said, "it's chalk." Her face didn't move. Temporary vandalism is still vandalism. Owen's shoulders tightened. Layla froze mid-drawing. Denise continued, calm and cold. "And I have allergies. The dust gets airborne." Layla looked up at me with those big eyes kids get when they're suddenly unsure if the world is safe. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" That sentence hit me like a punch to the chest. Not because of Denise, not because of the rules, but because my kid thought drawing a unicorn could make her a criminal. I crouched down beside her, brushed chalk dust off her fingers, and forced a smile. "No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble. Captain Sprinkle is amazing." Denise made a little huffing sound. "This needs to be removed by this afternoon." I stood back up, jaw tight. "I'll take care of it." That's what she wanted. Compliance. The quiet nod. She nodded once, satisfied, and before leaving she lifted her phone and snapped photos from 3 angles like she was documenting a crime scene. Then she walked away, stepping around the chalk like it might infect her. That evening, after the kids went inside, I hosed the driveway down. The unicorn smeared into gray water and disappeared toward the curb. And I swear to God, it felt like I was rinsing away more than chalk. My wife Tessa watched from the kitchen window, arms folded, trying not to laugh. "She really came over with a folder?" she asked. "She had a folder," I said. "A literal folder." Tessa shook her head. "Let it go. People like that live off reactions." She was right. She's always right. But that night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Layla's voice. "Are we in trouble?" I kept seeing Denise's face, the smug satisfaction of knowing she could walk onto my property and make my kids feel small. I grew up being the quiet kid. The easy target. The one teachers assumed wouldn't fight back. As an adult, I got good at staying agreeable. I told myself it was maturity. But sometimes people don't see maturity. They see weakness, and they push. Around midnight, I grabbed my phone and started scrolling mindlessly, trying to shut my brain off. That's when I saw it. A time-lapse video of a street artist drawing a 3D illusion on pavement. It looked like a cracked open glacier, glowing blue inside. People were gasping, stepping carefully, taking photos like they might fall into it. It was chalk. Just chalk. I sat up in bed and stared at my screen until my eyes burned. And then, slowly, a smile crept onto my face. Denise wanted uniform. She wanted clean. She wanted nothing that disrupts neighborhood appearance. Fine. I wouldn't disrupt it with a unicorn. I'd disrupt it with something that made grown adults stop in the street and question reality. The next morning, I went down an internet rabbit hole looking for professional pavement illusion artists. And let me tell you, that world is full of two kinds of people. Wholesome entertainers who draw cartoon princesses and unhinged geniuses who treat concrete like a movie set. The first guy I called spoke like he lived inside a poetry slam. Chalk is ephemeral, he murmured. It is the breath of the earth. I said, can you draw something that terrifies my neighborhood busybody? He went silent like I'd insulted his ancestors. My work is not for suburban disputes, he said, offended. My minimum is $12,000. Click. The second company offered cartoon animals for birthday parties. I asked if they could do a realistic sinkhole. The woman paused and said, we have a really popular giraffe. Click. I was about to give up when I found a website that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2009. Neon text, messy layout, and a logo that said Sidewalk Sorcery. The artist's name was Marco Rains. His portfolio was insane. Giant spiders crawling out of storm drains, sharks swimming through asphalt, staircases descending into nothing. I called the number. He answered on the second ring. Yeah. His voice sounded young, casual, like he was chewing gum. Hey, I said, my name's Evan. I have a weird request. Weird requests pay my rent, he replied. Talk to me. So I told him everything. The kids, the chalk, Denise, the folder, the photos, the way my daughter asked if she was in trouble for drawing a unicorn. When I finished, I expected him to laugh or hang up. Instead, he chuckled low. Bro, he said, you want legal chaos. I want harmless, temporary chaos, I said. On my own property. I love it, he replied. What's her vibe? Beige, I said instantly. Grayish. The color of printer paper. He laughed. Say no more. We planned like we were organizing a heist. He asked about sidewalk angles, slope, sight lines from the street. He wasn't just an artist. He was a tactician. He said he could come Friday morning before sunrise. So Friday at 4:45 a.m., I'm standing outside in sweatpants holding coffee, feeling like I'm about to commit a crime. Marco rolls up in a battered van covered in paint splatters. He steps out, messy hair, stained jeans, hands already chalky. He nods at me and says, you ready to ruin somebody's morning? I should have felt guilty. I didn't. We worked under the street lamp. He snapped chalk lines, marked grids, measured perspective points like he was opening a portal. Watching him was unreal. He blended shadows with his palms, stepped back, squinted, adjusted, and suddenly the sidewalk started to look like it had depth, like it had cracked open. By sunrise it was done. Right in the center of my sidewalk was a jagged, glowing fissure, like the ground had split open into a cold blue cavern. From the street, it looked real enough to make my stomach tighten. Marco dusted off his hands. Phase 1, he said. Let's see how she handles it. Then he fist-bumped me and drove off like a chalk ninja. I sat on my steps with fresh coffee and waited. Denise always power-walked at 6:55 sharp. At 6:54 her front door opened. She stepped out in a matching athletic set that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. She marched toward my house like she owned the sidewalk. Then she saw it. Her whole body froze. She didn't scream. She sucked in air like she'd been punched. She stumbled backward, hand flying to her chest, eyes wide. And for one beautiful second, she looked human. Then she realized neighbors were watching through curtains, and her face twisted into pure rage. Evan, she yelled. I stepped out like I had no idea what was happening. Morning, I said cheerfully. She pointed at the crack. This is a safety hazard. Oh wow, I said, leaning forward. That's wild. It almost looks real. Her eyes narrowed. You did this. I shrugged. Did what? Draw on my sidewalk. She sputtered, furious. Yes. It's chalk, I said. Temporary. She pulled out her phone and started dialing like she was calling the FBI. I'm reporting this. Go for it, I replied. Neighbors started coming out. A guy across the street laughed and filmed it. A teenager rode past on a bike and nearly swerved into a mailbox, staring at the illusion. Denise stood there shaking with rage because she couldn't punish the earth for cracking open. And she couldn't admit it was art without giving me a win. 2 days later, rain washed it away. Denise strutted past afterward with a smug smile like the weather was her personal assistant. On Monday, I got a letter. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Thick paper. Notice of violation. The committee warned me that further surface modifications would result in fines. I stared at it in my kitchen while Tessa read over my shoulder. You're not stopping, are you? She said quietly. I folded the letter like it was a menu. No, I said. I'm just getting started. I texted Marco a photo. He replied instantly. Cool. Phase 2 should be personal. The next Friday, Marco came back and drew something less scary but way more insulting. A giant cartoon raccoon, half emerging from my sidewalk like it lived under the neighborhood. Big cute eyes. Fluffy tail. But the paws were the masterpiece. They were positioned so it looked like the raccoon was reaching across the property line and stealing decorations from Denise's yard. A garden sign. A ceramic turtle. A wind chime. All drawn. All perfectly placed. When Denise saw it, she didn't scream. She growled. I swear it sounded like a kettle about to blow. This is harassment, she shouted, marching toward the property line. Neighbors were laughing now, not just at the art, but at her. And that's what broke her. She called the police. I didn't know until I saw flashing lights outside my window. 2 squad cars. I stepped onto my porch, heart pounding, trying to look calm. Denise was on her lawn ranting to an older officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The younger officer stared at the raccoon with his lips pressed tight, like he was fighting a smile. The older officer turned to me. Sir, are you the homeowner? Yes, I said. Denise cut in. He's targeting me. This is intimidation. It's a public nuisance. The officer walked over, crouched down, rubbed his thumb on the raccoon's tail. Blue chalk smeared on his skin. He stood up and looked at Denise. Ma'am, he said flatly, it's chalk. But it's directed at me, she snapped. The younger officer asked, is he on your property? No, has he threatened you? No, but the implication. The older officer held up a hand. There's no law against drawing on your own sidewalk, unless it's obscene or permanent damage. He glanced at me, eyes softening. Try to keep the peace, all right? But his expression said something else. It said, dude, this is hilarious. They left. Denise stood there red-faced, defeated, while half the street watched her lose to a chalk raccoon. That night, someone posted photos in the neighborhood Facebook group. The raccoon. The police cars. Denise looking like she was about to combust. The caption read, whoever is doing this, you are a hero. It spread like wildfire. By morning, strangers were driving by slowly to look. Then a local community page reposted it. By lunchtime, a local news producer messaged me. 2 days later, a news van parked outside my house. A reporter knocked. A cameraman pointed the lens at my sidewalk like it was evidence. Tessa whispered behind me, please don't get us sued. I opened the door and put on my most innocent face. The reporter smiled. We're hearing about a neighborhood chalk dispute. Oh, I said, gesturing to the raccoon. Yeah. Just family art. The kids love it. I talked about creativity, about community, about neighbors laughing together. I didn't mention Denise. I didn't mention the letter. Because the best revenge isn't yelling your enemy's name. It's letting the world see them without you explaining. That evening, we watched ourselves on TV. My house. My sidewalk. My voice saying things like, bringing people together. They showed Denise's closed curtains while the reporter said, one resident has filed multiple complaints. The online comments were savage. And not toward me. The committee panicked. Within 48 hours, I got summoned to an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. It was packed. People I'd never seen showed up like it was a pay-per-view event. Denise arrived with a binder and a slideshow clicker. Of course she did. She presented photos of my chalk art, screenshots of guidelines, a slide titled Decline in Property Appeal. She talked about safety and respect and order. Then she pointed at me and said, this man is deliberately provoking me. When it was my turn, I stood up, hands slightly shaking, not from fear, but adrenaline. I looked around the room and said, "I'm not here to fight. If anyone felt genuinely uncomfortable, I'm sorry." Denise's face lifted like she'd won. Then I continued. "But my kid asked me if she was in trouble for drawing a unicorn on her own driveway." "A unicorn?" the room murmured. I kept going. "Rules matter. But rules without kindness turn into a weapon. I'm not raising my kids in a place where joy is treated like a violation." Silence. Then one guy started clapping. Then more. It rolled through the room like a wave. Denise sat down stiffly, staring ahead. The committee chair cleared his throat and announced they'd pause enforcement while reviewing the language about temporary art. Translation: Denise lost. And I should have stopped there. That's the satisfying ending. But here's where it got complicated. After the meeting, people started treating my sidewalk like a public attraction. Kids I didn't know came onto my driveway to take photos. Teenagers showed up one night and left ugly scribbles. Someone's dog dug up my mulch while the owner filmed TikToks. And then, Denise came to my door. No binder. No sunglasses. Just her holding a small plastic container. "I baked these," she said stiffly. "For the children." I stared at it. "Cookies." She nodded. I may have overreacted. The apology sounded like it physically hurt her. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired. Because I couldn't tell if she meant it, or if she just hated being publicly humiliated. I thanked her, took the cookies, and she walked away without another word. That night, Tessa asked me, "Are you going to keep doing it?" I looked out at my blank sidewalk, washed clean by rain, and I thought about how good it felt to finally not be the guy who backs down. But I also thought about how quickly people turn my quiet street into a circus. "I don't know," I admitted. Because I won. But I also started something. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Because I genuinely want to know what you think. Was this justice? Or was it bullying back with better marketing? If you were in my shoes, would you have let it go for peace, or pushed back so your kids never learn to shrink for someone else's comfort? Drop a comment and tell me where the line is. When does standing up for yourself become going too far? And do you think people like Denise ever truly change? Or do they just learn to hide it better? If you've ever dealt with an HOA tyrant, a neighborhood Karen, or anyone who tried to police harmless joy, I want your story. Hit like, subscribe, and for the love of Captain Sprinkle, let kids draw on the sidewalk.